This is Kim Meyer, host of Choose to Rise. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good here on Public House Media. I just want to thank you for listening to the following broadcast brought to you by Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope that you'll come check out my show, How to Write Good, the writing show that is not about writing. A new show of How to Write Good comes out every Wednesday, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of How to Write Good. Again, thanks for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey everyone, welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy and you probably are too. This is Emily and I'm here today with Lindsay and Elisabeth, and we're here to talk nerdy to you. Today we have a pretty serious discussion that we wanted to have, and it's something we're sure will rile up some fanboys, but we think it's a needed discussion, and that is why Batman is wrong and why his personal quest will never truly succeed.
So I think, first of all, just in case, anyone is not really that familiar with Batman, I think we need to lay the groundwork as to his past and what exactly his personal quest and his code entails. Because, some of the elements of his story, I'm sure a lot of people know, but, we just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page,
Even just for me, because I'm very unfamiliar with the whole Batman deal. Like, I know that he's the Knight of the Dark Knight, like the guy that comes out and he's Batman and he's rich, and that's all I know, basically.
So basically, Elisabeth, you're going to take the reins on this one, because I'll admit what I do know is very rudimentary, part animation, part comic, part the old movies, part the Gotham television show. I don't really have a real grasp on what his mission, personal quest is.
Well, I'm sure just about everybody is probably familiar with the fact that Bruce's parents were killed when he was a very young boy, like 8 or 9 years old. They were mugged in an alley by a random thug named Joe Chill. And that really, obviously had a very deep impression on young Bruce. But the thing is, he never really took the time to address a lot of that trauma associated with losing his parents in such a way. And it kind of just festered in him, and it kind of gave him the mindset that, he personally needs to address the crime in Gotham. He needs to go out there and fix all the problems, as not as realistic as that sounds. Like, that's kind of like his mindset, is that he needs to do this. And so that is really what kind of drove him to train. It drove him to hone his abilities as a detective, as an investigator, as to, investing and designing all of the technology that he uses as Batman. And that's how he more or less became the Batman. And with that, he developed his own personal code of ethics for how he was going to conduct himself when he was Batman. Now, this has changed somewhat here and there over time. I think a lot of people may be familiar with he doesn't use guns and he doesn't kill thing. That has not always necessarily been the case. In his very early iterations in the comics, he actually did have a gun and he did kill. And obviously Flashpoint Batman, who is Thomas Wayne and not Bruce Wayne, he has guns and he has no compunction with killing. But standard modern iterations of Batman is very strict with no guns, no killing. And
what about Adam West's Batman? Do we know anything about him?
Pretty much the same. Like, he was going to avoid killing as much as possible. It is interesting in Tim Burton's iterations of like Batman and Batman Returns. It's not exactly directly addressed, but when you're watching it, it's like, yeah, that dude is dead. Like, he just dropped him down how many, he just blatantly dropped this dude down how many steps. He's dead. He is dead. I don't care what anybody thinks, he's dead.
The weapon being gravity versus artillery. Okay.
Yeah, but I think most iterations do consider that, he doesn't kill, he just captures. He captures and returns them to wherever they need to be returned. Some he takes to Blackgate, which is like the standard prison in the area, but most of them he actually takes back to Arkham, which is which most people know as Arkham Asylum, which is where the psychiatric patients go. Of course, with all of this that he's doing, with going out there and acting on his own, separate from the police, not, coordinating somewhat with the police, but still acting on his own and doing his own thing and just capturing these criminals, you have to really come and ask the question, is this really good for Gotham in general? And the answer is, I really don't think it is.
Well, let's find out why.
Okay, well, I mentioned that most of the people that he captures goes to Arkham Asylum. And the thing is, people escape from there so frequently, it's a running joke. Like, the criminals will blatantly just say, oh, well, I'll see you later. I'll get out in no time. I'll escape. It's not really that much of a deterrent to be put in Arkham if you know that you can escape, and you can escape pretty easily.
Well, and another thing too, so they put the majority of these criminals in Arkham Asylum, so that makes the assumption that they need psychiatric help, which a lot of them we will discover that they do. But then are they getting the help that they need?
I don't think so. I mean, before I even really got into, the lore, I kind of drew the conclusion that if they're so lax about security, you can, these hardened criminals can basically just walk out the door in some cases. I mean, you can't really imagine that the doctors are really that invested in the mental health care of their patients.
Yeah, which is really sad.
Yeah. One of the really interesting things I found about the Arkham games, specifically Arkham Asylum, is that you really actually get to go into the asylum in detail and go through the place and really see the conditions that the patients are kept in. And it's even the good patients are not really kept in that great of a condition. And you actually find out that Waylon Jones, also known as Killer Croc, he's not kept in a cell. He's not kept in a room at all. He's actually kept in the waterways beneath Arkham, where he receives no therapy, no meds, and no treatment of any kind. They literally just shove him down there, and the guards will throw down some raw meat every few days. That's it.
Okay, so I never really thought that Arkham was to rehabilitate these people and send them back into society. I always figured the idea was, obviously Gotham is this corrupt city, as it were, but I always figured Arkham was like the epitome of creating the worst.
It's like a catch-all
in these people. Yeah. So I mean, like, I get that it's an asylum, and what you would really want them to do in something like this would be to rehabilitate them, or to, medicate or give them psychiatric therapy, that kind of stuff, to get them back into some kind of functional existence. But simultaneously, I never thought Arkham was meant to do that. Like, there's just so many different things that it should have been doing if its main goal was to put these people into some kind of life.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think that was supposed to be its goal. I don't know if they were just so overwhelmed with the amount of people that were being admitted that they just kind of gave up after a while. Later on, I do actually have a character who was actually successfully rehabilitated in Arkham and was released and became a productive member of society. So it's not that it is impossible. It's just, I think they've just gotten to the point where they just don't care anymore, which is just really, really sad, because there are patients that have so much potential for being turned around. I mean, there are obviously cases where they're just hopeless, like the Joker, where they're just not going to get better no matter what. But there are plenty of characters who really, with just a little bit of time and dedication, they could become better. I was just talking about Waylon Jones. In the animated series, there's an episode where he escapes one time, and he actually falls in accidentally with this retired circus troupe that just accepts him, and they just treat him like everybody else, because I mean, they have their own quirks. Like there's some conjoined twins. I believe there's a little person. There's, there's all kinds of, there's all kinds of characters like that. And so, they're like, okay, well, you're different, but we're different too. And that's cool. And they just treat him like a normal human being. And within a few days, you can see he starts changing. He starts actually acting more human and acting good, like making good decisions. And it just goes to show that he really just, somebody like that just needs a chance. They need somebody to just treat them like a human being, treat them with dignity and respect, and they could just completely turn around.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Because if it is like you say that, they basically like expect to escape from Arkham, obviously there's no draw to keep them there either.
Yeah, because it's like, well, I'll be out in a few days, maybe a week or two. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, and as I mentioned earlier, there was a particular character called the ventriloquist. He had dissociative identity disorder as a result of witnessing his mother's assassination, and he has this like evil side that works through a ventriloquist dummy. And in the animated series, he actually is reformed. Like, he goes to Arkham, he does get better, and he's released. Wow. He almost does get drawn back into the world of crime by being manipulated, but he fights it off. Batman helps him. Bruce Wayne actually helps get him a job, and he actually gets a happy ending.
That's actually kind of amazing. I'm really impressed by that.
There are other characters like Two-Face. Harvey Dent really just has an anger problem that he refused to address for so long it split his personality. Mr. Freeze is only a criminal to fund his research to save his wife Nora. And I mean, Bruce owns a company that is involved with tons of research. If you give him a job there, allow him the funds and the opportunity to research, along with the help provided to a Wayne Tech researcher, he wouldn't have any reason to be a criminal and risk getting captured and his wife falling into the wrong hands.
That makes sense to me.
It's just, there are so many characters that really, they just need a little bit of help. And it's like they're almost like they're so close to it, but Arkham just doesn't even care anymore. And they're just like, okay, yeah, just put him in here.
Yeah. It's like putting a Band-Aid on something that you don't normally, I don't know.
I came up with the analogy. It's like putting a Band-Aid on an amputated limb.
There we go.
Like, it makes absolutely zero difference in the long run for most of the inmates. And it's really sad, because if they are just given the chance, if they're given proper therapy and medication, and they're just treated with dignity and respect, it's like you could really help a lot of people.
Okay. So let's be serious, though. We know that Gotham isn't your normal city. It's corrupt. It's ugly. They didn't really stand a chance just because they were in Gotham, right? I mean, Arkham Asylum, Gotham, they kind of go hand in hand with corruption and ill-fated criminals with mental issues. I mean, I can't think of a better way to put it. Like, I always figured Gotham made them who they were, and Gotham continued to have its hands in their clay.
Yeah. And I mean, that's part of the thing that, Bruce kind of fails in this, because he could help. He could help all of Gotham, not as Batman, but as Bruce
Wayne.
I
see where you're going.
Because I mean, even aside from the inmates that are receiving obviously subpar care, I mean, Batman wants to help the people of Gotham, right? He wants to make the city safe so that, the people can thrive. But he doesn't really do anything to actually address the root causes. I mean, there is links seen between certain untreated or ill-treated mental illnesses, which I think we can plainly see at work in Gotham already. But really, an even bigger contribution to a crime rate is poverty and income inequality. There are quite a few elite families in Gotham, including Bruce Wayne, but the rest of Gotham's citizens are really far from well off. The city is portrayed at really barely having any middle class at all. And I mean, there have been studies upon studies that have shown that where there's poverty and income inequality, there is a breeding ground for crime. Right. So, I mean, it kind of makes me wonder, Bruce Wayne is a billionaire. There are so many ways he could help out the people of the city that he claims to love so much. And I mean, I'm not just suggesting like just handing out money left and right, because I mean, that's not really going to solve any problems, but offering legit opportunities to people, opportunities like scholarships for those who want to receive a higher education. They can easily do that. Building up low-income housing so that people have a place to go where they won't have to worry about their slumlord kicking them to the curb. Funding after-school programs so that kids have something to do and a worthy distraction compared to running with gangs. Building up soup kitchens and outreach programs to make sure that no one has to go hungry or go without. And I mean, he owns a freaking company. There, he could create training programs of his own to help prepare people for a career, either at Wayne Tech or maybe even somewhere else in the corporate world. And that's like directly just working with the people of Gotham.
If he were to start these things, though, if he were to start them, when would he have to do that? Like at what point are the poor and criminal part of society, when are they too far gone to be saved?
Considering whenever, I think he should do this like in place of being Batman. So, I mean, obviously from a very like younger age, I say go ahead and just start implementing those things. Start building them up. Just start putting them out there. And even if, I mean, obviously there is already corruption out there, but just putting them out there and trying to break that cycle will help in the long run.
Right. I just feel like at some point in time, there's no hope. There's no chance for that to be fixed.
There probably is. I mean, we do see a glimpse of the future, and probably at that point in that future, it's probably too late. But most of the timeline within that Bruce Wayne operating as Batman, during that time, I don't think it's really truly too late. I think there is parts where it could kind of start to be that way, but really if he just starts putting in those programs, building up the city, just investing in the actual city that he claims to love so much, I think it could make a huge difference.
It would definitely not be an instant fix, for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's going to take time. It's not something that's going to turn around immediately.
Right. Like it would take, the one program, make sure that it gets up on its feet and running well, some kind of mentorship training here and there, adding things onto each other once one thing is solid, then moving on to the next thing, I think.
And really, I mean, even aside from just directly helping the people of Gotham, there's a lot he could do with partnering with the police, because, I mean, he created all of this insanely advanced crime fighting technology to help him as Batman. Why don't you give or sell that tech to the police so that they can catch the criminals? Maybe put together a computer for them like the Bat computer so they can better catalog and parse information. Give them training like he gave to all the Robins and to Batgirl. And, so they can actually go toe to toe with criminals if they actually need to,
And that reminds me of, if you've seen the Lego Batman movie that came out recently, he does end up working with the police very reluctantly and ends up working with Batgirl. And when they first become a quote unquote team, he's like, okay, well, if you're on the Bat team, then you have to have all Bat gear. So here you go.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was a really great moment.
Okay, so what do we think is holding Batman back from trying to nip the problems in the bud before they become such an issue?
Honestly, I think it really all traces back to his unaddressed trauma and not processing the grief that he experienced from watching his parents die, because it gave him very like tunnel vision. So he's very into this idea that he has to do this all himself, and he really becomes selfish in that regard. I mean, he does have different Robins, he has Batgirl, he has different sidekicks here and there, but really when it comes down to it, Batman really works alone. He even will keep his own associates and the Justice League in the dark if he thinks it's necessary in certain situations. It's all on him, and it's really not realistic. I looked this up just because I was purely curious, and Gotham is supposed to be a city of approximately 10 million people.
That's humongous.
just to put it in a real life perspective, that's 2.5 million more people than New York City, which boasts the highest population in the United States.
That's huge.
The police force always doesn't look like it's big enough to handle 10 million people.
And I mean, to put that further in perspective with the DC universe, Star City, where Green Arrow hails from, which, he's a rich crime fighter with no powers, just like Batman. His city's population is about 600,000.
Okay. That's a lot smaller. Green Arrow seems to be of a similar mind as Batman.
Mm-hmm. And yet he deals with a whole lot less.
Yeah.
If you want to go up higher, there's Central City, which is home of the Flash. He deals with a population of 750,000. And really the only city in DC that has a bigger population than Gotham is Metropolis. And it only surpasses it by 1 million with a population of 11 million. And I mean, Metropolis has Superman.
Yeah. I feel like Metropolis doesn't have as mentally ill villains either.
Okay, so what if it's not that Batman's wrong, but that him being a hero, being someone that certain parts of the Gotham PD look to, such as Commissioner Gordon, what if he creates the crime? What if having someone to save you or save the city makes the city worse? What if it's not about things he could have done as Bruce Wayne, but the fact that he simply is Batman?
And so by the fact that there is a Batman, then crime is coming
worse.
Back out.
Right. Like the criminals have to try and best Batman, therefore they get worse and worse. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And I think in some situations that definitely could be the case, but throughout its history, Gotham has always pretty much had issues. So, I mean, whether or not certain criminals might not be there, I still think crime would be pretty high. And, it definitely needs the different things that we've been discussing, things like opportunities and programs put into place to help the people. The police definitely need an upgrade. The mental health field definitely needs huge strides to be taken in order to properly address, the needs of the people. So even if we were to take a few criminals, maybe a few super criminals out of the equation, that still leaves a lot of crime that needs to be addressed. And that still could be easily addressed by Bruce Wayne if he still feels so strongly that he needs to help the city. But he can't get past himself. And I think just looking at it this way, it really puts into perspective that Batman is delusional. He can't even wipe out the majority of crimes. And even the criminals that he does fight, and he puts back into an unhealthy and toxic environment. And he still does nothing to help the actual citizens. And yet he will still never admit that he's wrong. And it's because of this that Gotham will never really get better.
Yeah, I mean, I get the disparity, the big difference between the poor and mentally in need, mentally, emotionally, psychologically in need, versus the rich and extremely rich and having the resources to be able to help many, but not doing it the right way. I just don't think it's necessarily that Batman's wrong. I think it's also that Gotham is wrong too.
Well, yeah. I mean, depending on where you want to pull their history from, Gotham has potentially been corrupt since its very foundation. So obviously weeding something out like that is going to take a lot of time. But, something like this is, it's steps that you take that may be small, but they really add up. So Batman himself may be taking large steps in trying to get criminals off the streets, but in the end, that alone is not going to be effective. It's the small steps that you take to invest in the future that's really going to be effective. And I mean, we can really get a pretty good peek at the future of Gotham. There is a couple of series such as Batman Beyond. There's also the graphic novel / animated movie, The Dark Knight Returns, not Rises, Returns. They're two separate things. And Dark Knight Returns is actually very, very good. And Batman is actually voiced by RoboCop. So definitely go check that out. But in those futures, Gotham, even after Batman has been operating for years, Gotham is even more bleak and crime-ridden than ever before. I think it's at this point that Gotham is truly hopeless because criminals are simply evolving and they're becoming even worse. And Bruce Wayne is just an old, bitter man. And sure, there might be Terry McGinnis to take over the cowl of Batman and Batman Beyond. There might be Dick Grayson as Nightwing. There might be the few more people that he's trained and who works as vigilante crime fighters, but it's just not enough. It becomes more and more clear that his own personal mission is not working. And I think it's at this point that Gotham passes the point of no hope. Because if Bruce Wayne had really set all of these things in motion very early on, then I think it could have really cut down on a lot of the issues that they have. But since he's waited for so long and has been doing things that are really ineffectual, I think it's finally reached this point where it's just like, even if he starts to put things in motion, he's already an old man. And I mean, once he passes on, who knows, if the person he leaves behind in charge, who knows if they'll really run it right, the way it needs to. So yeah, I think at that point it becomes the point of no return. And I mean, this is, of course, as opposed to in the beginning, if Bruce had actually dealt with and processed his trauma and his grief and likely his PTSD from losing his parents the way that he did, instead of, dealing with all these immediate problems and just getting these criminals put where they need to go, just focus on these little steps first and, get these situated, maybe create a couple of programs, make sure that they're good, add on to it, invest in the police force, create job opportunities. And over time, by the time he gets to that age, I think he would have seen a lot better results than if he just was Batman.
Let's be serious, though. Watching a city fall is a lot more interesting than watching a city thrive, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does make for the continued story. For the fact that, right, like, it would be really boring if every single criminal got locked away and then stayed away forever.
Yeah, and everything worked out and sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, although sunshine and rainbows are fun.
Like almost everybody has a redemption arc, and everybody becomes mentally healthy again. Even still, I think you could potentially still make a good story out of it. But again, it just goes back to Bruce and how he, deals with things himself.
Right, and like the whole basis of the Batman story is, hero versus villains, and that's just the backbone of it.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because Batman is obviously one of those superheroes that have been in print for decades. So a lot of his procedures and the things that he does and his motivations for doing so, in the age of anti-heroes and things like that I think we discussed on an earlier episode, they can almost kind of seem antiquated in a way. Because even Red Hood, or a former Robin named Jason Todd, even he goes, Batman, this isn't working. He tells him, this isn't working. You need to do something different, and he won't listen. And I think that's a really interesting dichotomy between the old comics and the new comics that are coming up, and writers realizing that, these models of these characters are unsustainable. And, in some cases, I think they are trying to tackle them in a slightly different way. And I'm kind of interested, especially to see with Red Hood and the Outlaws, where that's going to take them.
Yeah, just to see if anything after, because that is like after Batman's done being Batman. Or no? Okay.
No, so he's still Batman. Jason is still operating not really alongside him, but along in the same continuity.
Okay. I see what you're saying. So like outside of what Batman's doing, what else is going on then? Yeah. Gotcha.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks for getting nerdy with us today. talk nerdy to us. What did you think about the points made in today's episode? It was a really fun idea on what Gotham and Batman have to do with each other. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And why? Find Beauties and Headcanons on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and now on Instagram. We officially have an Instagram that we can use. It is at PHM Beauties and Headcanons. You can share your nerdy topic suggestions there. Again, it's PHM Beauties and Headcanons. I know it's a little bit long, but we have to have it that way. Subscribe to this podcast and others from Public House Media on iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, and wherever good podcasts are found. We love feedback, as always. So if you liked this episode, or if you didn't, or if you want to talk nerdy to us, or if you just want to give us a rating or a review, keep on doing that so we can keep on making great episodes for you. I'm Lindsay.
I'm Elisabeth.
And I'm Emily. And thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.